Hello everyone, Max here with Fiction Rant to bring you part 6 of the Federation from Star Trek versus the Galactic Empire from Star Wars, a full breakdown with rules and different matchup scenarios. Also, I have links to my Patreon, Coffee and Fourth Wall in the description if you'd like to support the channel. I'd like to do a breakdown just like this one for a matchup between the Protoss and Eldar, but I've been putting it off because it intimidates me. So I decided to host discussion on the subject on my Patreon. If you want to join the discussion there, I'm also kind of spitballing some other matchup ideas on there. Also, big shout out to my patrons, Aotis, Alistair Boneman, Caro, and Atri. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. And yeah, on to the video. This is part 6 where I'll talk about the unique advantages held by each side. These are technologies and universe properties that are not held by the other side. Again, this is the Federation from Star Trek as of the Dominion War versus the Galactic Empire from Star Wars as of the Battle of Endor, but the Rebel Alliance doesn't exist. And Voyager isn't back from the Delta Quadrant, so there's no Borg tech or any of that kind of stuff being introduced into the Federation either. Before we get into things, I do want to clarify the rules a little bit. My intent with saying that the Rebellion doesn't exist is that this be a true 1v1 matchup with no other factions contributing to the fighting. That said, Internal Dissent and Worlds Rebelling is totally part of the comparison, even though they won't be organizing their own forces to join in the fight. Basically, Worlds can break away and stop contributing, but they can't unify and turn the fight into a multi-front affair. This is, of course, totally unreasonable, realistically speaking, but it's the only way to have a 1v1 that actually stays a 1v1 and not have additional factions cropping up. Alright, now that that's done, I'll start with Star Wars because it should be relatively straightforward since there's just less Star Wars to be had than the multitude of Star Trek shows in all their episodes. First, and probably most iconically, the Empire has a fixation with superweapons, most notably the Death Star. For the purposes of this particular matchup, the second Death Star. Just assume that the Rebels were wiped out at Hoth. This titanic battle station is littered with turbolasers across its surface, carries a standard complement of over 4,000 fighters, and most importantly, a super laser capable of pulverizing a planet. The second Death Star even has improved targeting over the first, allowing it to target individual capital ships as well as having superior recharge rate for more frequent shots. Granted, those shots against capital ships are generally not full power, because why would you bother? So, you get more frequent shots because they're not as powerful and because the abilities to recharge are improved. I've already had this conversation a few times in the comments, so I'll put this out there right now. Even if we accept that petatons per second yield of phasers from Strange New Worlds, they still don't come close to the power of a super laser shot. To destroy a planet using petatons of energy per second wouldn't take long, but to actually pulverize it, as like a super laser does, you would need yotatons of energy. So there's like 15 orders of magnitude in power between them. It would take a lot of phasers firing for a long time in order to match that. And yes, the fact that it delivers yotatons of energy is hilarious considering we're talking about Star Wars, so feel free to giggle, you nerds. Also, important to mention, neither Death Star seem to be actually carrying their own shields. The first has a brief mention of a magnetic shield which just retains atmosphere, and the second has shielding, but that was originating from Endor's moon, not from the Death Star itself. It's unclear if they intended to shield the whole thing eventually, but the pattern seems to be that they shield sensitive things like thermal exhaust ports and the observation area that the Emperor was using, and hangars and such, but not the rest of the station, instead relying upon armor. Moving on, the other most iconic element of Star Wars that is unique to that universe is the Force. The actual limits on what a practitioner can actually do with the Force are pretty vague, but there's some common threads of basic things that they can do, and the potency of those things vary according to the practitioner and their particular talents and practice and all that kind of stuff. I won't get into every power, but the main ones are telekinesis, moving things around with your mind, clairvoyance, being able to sense things at a distance, past, present, and future, energy manipulation, shooting out lightning, absorbing or redirecting energy, mental manipulation, mind tricks and sensing the thoughts and emotions of others, and physical augmentation, gaining endurance, speed, and strength. There's more, but I don't feel the need to be exhaustive here. Suffice to say, any practitioner of the Force is a superhuman with insane powers that make them incredibly potent combatants. Something that keeps coming up in comment sections, so I'll be remiss to not talk about it, is the Imperial use of jamming technology, most clearly demonstrated in Return of the Jedi. This jamming tech is used to confuse sensors, but oddly apparently doesn't actually disrupt communications since everyone was still able to talk with each other just fine. Unless that jammer is mounted on a speeder bike, then it disrupts communications. It's inconsistent. Honestly, the effectiveness and applications of jamming tech in Star Wars are just all over the place and really badly defined. Some believe that jamming tech is why everyone engages at spitting distance, since beyond that your sensors just can't help you. I personally don't buy this argument, since Star Wars sensors across the board are generally pretty just awful. For example, in Empire Strikes Back, the Millennium Falcon moves into attack position before landing on the side of a Star Destroyer, causing the entire Imperial fleet to just lose track of them, and prompting Captain Nita to get all confused and say, "No ship that small has a cloaking device." So yeah, they had all the telemetry needed in order to track the Falcon. The Falcon then landed on them, adding a whole bunch of weight to the sides of one of their ships. And it couldn't be using jamming tech at the time, because if you use your jamming tech, then your enemies know that you're there. They just don't know exactly where you are. The fact that they're being jammed lets you know there's something going on. So yeah, they had all the information and still couldn't find the Falcon. We can also look at A New Hope, where in order to find life signs on the Falcon, they needed a sensor suite the size of a kitchen oven. So yeah, the sensors in Star Wars are kind of awful compared to a lot of other universes, in this case Star Trek, where their sensors are basically magic. So that's why I don't buy the argument about, oh, well, their jamming is what makes the spitting distance engagements necessary. No, I think the fact that they're using plasma cannons is why the spitting distance engagements are necessary. You just can't maintain containment of plasma that long. The jamming undoubtedly helps with things like making it so that they can't tell what your shield status is, that kind of stuff. That's demonstrably was what was going on. They couldn't tell if the shield was up or down around the Death Star, so they had to pull away. But beyond that, I don't think so. I don't think there's any real basis for saying we can't hit anything at beyond this distance because of jamming. Especially because there's other sources like the tech manual that everybody likes to throw out there, which I'm not saying is canon. It's definitely not canon. But it did say that the turbo lasers on a Venator were able to hit things at 10 light seconds away, or 10 light minutes away, pardon. If someone would even make that claim, clearly jamming is not something that they're really considering. And so yeah, I'm not going to consider it as super significant either, beyond just messing up communications. Anyway, moving on, I would also like to mention interdictor cruisers, as they're used as artificial gravity wells to pull ships out of hyperspace. Unfortunately, due to the way that warp drive works, as compared to hyperdrives, interdictors won't actually really do anything to a warp-capable ship, except maybe skewing the course of a passing ship a little bit. Finally, the last thing that I want to focus on for Star Wars is droids. They're freaking everywhere, and they're pretty much all sentient, if a bit dumb a lot of the time. Droids are used for everything from translation to companionship to various engineering functions and cooking, and have a strange thing that unless you periodically wipe their memories, they start basically becoming more and more sapient. So, of course, the Empire in particular wipes the memories of their droids as a matter of routine. Wouldn't want the clankers getting uppity. There was a real problem a few years ago. Also, the Empire can produce a lot of droids very quickly, and they do all the time in order to keep the engine of government and all their military running smoothly, though they tend to steer away from combat models. There are things like the K2 series security droids that are still relatively uncommon, despite the fact that they're basically super soldiers. You just don't see that many of them. Moving on over to the Federation, we've got a multitude of unique technologies. There's transporters, which allow near-instant movement at a range of around 40,000 kilometers without the need for shuttles, and which can even be miniaturized far enough to be mounted on the end of a rifle. Transporters can be impeded by shielding or certain materials like neutronium, or just sufficient interference, but bypass most armor easily, as demonstrated literally every time that boarding parties are beamed aboard ships. Transporters also have a couple neat features built in. They have biofilters, which keep pathogens and such from hitching rides on crew members, and for security purposes, they can remove objects from people mid-transit, be that weapons or other equipment. The Federation also makes wide use of matter replicators, which either reconfigure existing matter to create objects, skipping the need for manufacturing facilities, or generate simple elements directly out of energy, though this is far less efficient and there's some stuff that just can't be replicated, notably latinum and dilithium, because reasons. Related to replicators, but different, and I've made this mistake before, they can be set up to create antimatter, like there's on-screen evidence for protocols that allow that to be done in the shows, but no actual lines, and it's actually produced in specialized refineries and then dispensed to ships to power them. Another distinctly Federation tech is hologram projectors. These are capable of creating what basically amounts to hard light constructs through a combination of light projection and force fields, which can even be made to be dangerous or even lethal if safeties are disabled. Typically, these holograms are restricted to specialized holodecks where all your wildest dreams can come true, so of course everyone just likes to do things like act out Jane Austen novels. However, holoprojectors aren't restricted to holotechs and can be set up pretty much anywhere, though they seem to run into technical issues more frequently when not in a specialized location. There's also a mobile emitter, but that's future tech from Voyager, so it doesn't count for the matchup. Moving on, the Federation equivalent to the Death Star is their starbases. These aren't nearly as powerful in terms of raw punching power as the Death Star, but they're quite formidable all the same. Deep Space Nine, a relatively tiny starbase, after being kitted out for about a year, was able to hold off an entire Klingon fleet, inflicting significant losses in the process. It's outside the time frame we're talking about, but Earth Space Dock was able to hold off hundreds of Borg-assimilated Federation ships that were blazing away for several hours before finally being destroyed. Federation stations are beastly. They also function as shipyards, and depending on the size and type, they can handle manufacture and refit of several to many ships simultaneously. Something small like DS9 can only handle 8 ships at a time and can't manufacture, but large ones like Earth Space Dock are fully equipped facilities capable of pumping out ships. The Federation also has dedicated manufacturing facilities like the Utopia Planitia shipyards, but those are another step beyond what starbases can do in terms of manufacturing, but don't come with all the other defensive and such features. Another factor I'd like to touch on briefly, but not focus on too much, is species diversity. The Federation consists of a multitude of species, all with their own abilities, and some that we would consider supernatural. Vulcans and Betazoids in particular are psychic. Vulcans can use this ability to forcibly extract information from the minds of others, but doing so requires physical contact with a mind meld. And Betazoids, while a bit more nebulous what they're actually capable of doing, are dramatically more potent cyclically than Vulcans, to the point where, for example, Lwaxana Troi, going through basically what amounts to menopause, had an impact on everyone on board the Enterprise, making them all horny. To be clear, neither Vulcans nor Betazoids nor any other species in the Federation have abilities to match Force users, but there's an awful lot more of them going around than there are Force users in the Empire. By contrast, and I should touch on this, the Empire is extremely xenophobic and does its best to include exclusively humans in positions of power and in the military. There's the odd exception, like Grand Admiral Thrawn and their willingness to enlist the help of bounty hunters from time to time, but species-wise, the Empire is basically just humans, and everyone else either gets to be enslaved, oppressed, or just stay out of the way. Finally, I'd like to continue talking a little bit about Federation sensors. These are basically magic. There's a multitude of demonstrations in what they can actually do, but here's a quick greatest hits list for you. They can identify and target individual people on populated worlds from orbit based on their DNA. They can detect energy from an incredibly wide spectrum, including tachyons, which move faster than light, gravitons, which are particles of gravity, and chronotons, which are particles of time, while also being able to detect things in different dimensions, like in subspace. For detecting other things in other dimensions, you need more specialized rigs, and they're not all set up to do that by default, but they can. They can detect and identify objects as small as ships at multiple light years at distance. There was even an incident in Voyager where they were able to detect a wormhole that was only a few centimeters across from several light years distance. A handheld tricorder can provide a full medical workup of a person in seconds without even touching them. And of course, mid-combat, sensors can provide thorough tactical data on opponents, including weapon and shield status, engine status, and other potential issues that their opponents are facing, all while their shields are up. Yeah, Trek sensors are insane. As a quick aside, I think the difference in sensor tech is emblematic of the difference between the two franchises. In Star Wars, the idea is, we're at war, find the other guy and blast him into oblivion, no nuance required. In Star Trek, it's about exploration and discovery, so they want all the tools capable of telling them everything about, well, everything. And it just happens that when you turn a lot of equipment like that against your enemies, you get a lot of really useful tactical information really quickly. And with that, I'll wrap up. There's a ton of other stuff I could touch on for each side, from their crazy medical technology to cloning and genetic engineering stuff, which both sides are capable of doing, but you don't. So it's kind of pointless to bring it up for a matchup, to one of any other dozens of little one-off things that we've seen in the shows and movies on both sides, but this video will get long enough as it is. But what do you all think? Am I skipping over something I really shouldn't? Am I misrepresenting anything? Let me know in the comments below. Again, I've got links to my Patreon, Fourth Wall, and Coffee in the description if you want to support the channel. And a huge shout out to my patrons Aotus, Alistair Boneman, Caro, and Atree. Thank you for supporting the channel. And until next time, live long and prosper, and may the Force be with you.